Today, I'm going to share with you a truly fascinating and complex crime case. The story begins in a peaceful rural area along the Changjiang River in Wangjiang County, Anhui Province, China. Life in this region revolves around the river, with many residents depending on fishing and aquaculture for their livelihoods. However, the tranquility was shattered by a shocking incident on the night of February 17, 2012. That night, the villages along the Changjiang River were silent when Mr. Li, who lived near the riverbank, was abruptly awakened by 3 loud explosions. He thought, "What was that noise? Could no one else hear it? It sounded like bombs going off." The following morning, the villagers were stunned to see a large police presence and barricades surrounding the area. Traffic police and firefighters were already at the scene. Curious residents gathered to figure out what had happened the previous night. It turned out that in the protective forest area under the Tongma levee near the river, a car had been completely burned. The explosions heard the previous night were the sounds of the vehicle detonating. The car was reduced to a metal frame, with everything flammable inside consumed by fire. Nearby trees were scorched, with blackened bark indicating the intensity of the blaze. The explosion had been so powerful that the car's sunroof was blown approximately 33 feet away. Inside the vehicle was a charred body, so severely burned that it was impossible to determine the gender, age, height, or any other identifying features. With everything inside destroyed, no identification documents could be recovered. However, police managed to find a license plate among the ashes nearby. Though partially damaged, the plate number was still visible. Anhui HSB 188. Upon checking the vehicle registration, the authorities identified the car as a Chevrolet owned by Shibao from Yangling. The police immediately contacted Shibao's wife. She explained that around 10 a.m. on February 17, 2012, Shibao had driven off in his silver Chevrolet and never returned. Coincidentally, it was that same night when the explosion near the Tongma levee was heard. Investigators meticulously searched the scene for any valuable evidence and discovered a car key, a shoelace buckle, and a belt buckle. Shibao's family later confirmed that the belt buckle belonged to him. Investigators even used the car key found at the scene to unlock the rolling shutter at Shibao's home, and it worked perfectly. Upon confirming the victim's identity, Shibao's wife was devastated and struggled to accept the harsh reality. She explained that her husband was involved in the agricultural supplies business and was the primary breadwinner for the family. She couldn't imagine how life would continue without him. At the scene, traffic police noticed only minor collision marks. The vehicle had no signs of significant impact damage, nor were there any clear collision patterns. This raised the question, why did the car explode and catch fire so violently? The initial theory was that it could have been a drunk driving accident. However, further investigation revealed 2 parallel tire tracks leading from the top of the Tongma levee down toward the riverbank. This indicated that the car had rolled down the levee. The Tongma levee, located on the northern side of the Changjiang River, is a paved roadway frequently used by vehicles. Could it be that the vehicle collided with another car, lost control, and then burst into flames? Investigators found this unlikely. Despite thoroughly inspecting nearby roads, they found no debris, shattered glass, or any suspicious objects. Furthermore, there were no visible skid marks on the pavement, suggesting the driver did not attempt to brake before veering off the road. The police thoroughly examined the vehicle for signs of collision. They found a minor dent on the lower right front bumper, which perfectly matched a similar dent on a small tree. This tree, located in the protective forest under the Changjiang levee, had a diameter of approximately 8 inches. The impact on the tree was light and matched the dent on the car's bumper. The collision was minor, causing only a small dent on the bumper without damaging any other parts of the vehicle. The car frame was not deformed, giving the impression that the collision was mild, yet the severity of the fire was extreme. According to the traffic police, such a minor impact could not have caused the explosion and intense fire. The biggest concern was that the flames appeared too violent to be a result of the collision alone. So, what could have caused the explosion and fire? At that moment, investigators at the scene were unable to determine if this was a traffic accident. Therefore, forensic and criminal investigation experts from the Wangjang County Police arrived at the scene. The extent of the vehicle damage left them stunned. When it was confirmed that the victim was Shibao, the Wangjang County Criminal Police were surprised, as he had been arrested the previous year for selling counterfeit and substandard goods and was out on bail awaiting trial. Shibao, 38 years old, was a fertilizer dealer from Huayang Town, Wangjang County. He was primarily involved in the agricultural supplies business, dealing in fertilizers. In 2010, he had conspired with others to sell counterfeit fertilizers, involving a total amount of 70,000 yen. However, after compensating the affected farmers, he was released on bail while awaiting trial. What the police didn't expect was that just 2 years later, Shibao would be found dead here. The crime scene was the Chengjiang levee, and the incident occurred at midnight. Why was Shibao driving to the levee at such an hour? What was he doing there? And who was the last person to see him alive? With these questions in mind, the police returned to question Shibao's wife. According to Shibao's wife, on February 17th, Shibao had a brief meeting with a man named Xu Yongsheng. She told the police that on the morning of February 17th, Shibao had driven her in his personal car to a hair salon in Wangjang County. At around 9 a.m., while she was getting her hair done, Shibao stayed in the car. She then noticed a black car pulling up behind his vehicle. A man got out and spoke with Shibao. She recognized the man as Yongsheng, a friend of Shibao, but she was unsure why he had come to see her husband. Yongsheng was also a local businessman. The police later tracked him down for questioning. Meanwhile, investigators continued their meticulous search at the crime scene, determined to uncover the truth behind the car fire. After a thorough search, firefighters discovered a critical clue. Upon closely examining the two front doors, they noticed that one side was lighter in color, while the other was completely blackened. The rear of the car was also blackened with a slight reddish hue. Based on the firefighters' assessment, the fire originated from the driver's cabin rather than the engine compartment, which is typically more prone to mechanical failures or electrical shorts. This allowed them to rule out accidental ignition from the vehicle's mechanical systems. Additionally, the car showed no structural deformation, and the doors could be easily opened, indicating that in the early stages of the fire, the driver would have had time to escape. Yet, the driver had burned completely to ashes. Could Zhu Shibao have been murdered? One particularly suspicious detail was that the body inside the car was completely charred, yet there were no signs of struggle. Normally, a person being burned alive would instinctively thrash around trying to escape. However, the body was completely still, almost as if it had been placed there before being set on fire. This raised serious concerns. The discovery shifted suspicion toward Yongsheng, who was already under investigation by the criminal police, as Shibao's wife had mentioned that her husband had met with him the day before the incident. She claimed that Yongsheng was the last person she saw with her husband. During questioning, Yongsheng stated, "Yes, I met Shibao at the hair salon that day. His wife was getting her hair washed while he waited outside. I brought up the debt he owed me and said, 'Hey, how much do you owe me now?' He hesitated and replied, 'Just a small amount, nothing much.' I said, 'Small. 390,000 yen is not a small amount.' Shibao fell silent. So I continued, 'It's been a long time. You haven't paid me back, and you're avoiding my calls. Why are you doing this?' Yongsheng further explained, 'I knew that the 390,000 yen debt was a loan Shibao had taken without telling his wife. When he saw me, he looked visibly nervous and worried. He tried to reassure me, saying, 'Don't worry, I'll pay you back soon.' So I suggested, 'Let's go to a tea house and talk this over properly.' But he refused, saying he had to wait for his wife to finish her hair treatment." Yongsheng continued, "Even though Shibao had been avoiding his debt, we were still friends. I didn't want to embarrass him in front of his wife, so I returned to my car and waited. When his wife finally got into their car, I followed closely behind. I figured he was planning to drop her off before discussing the debt, but something felt off. When we reached a traffic light, he suddenly ran a red light and sped off. I stopped at the light, and by the time it turned green, I had lost him. I went straight to the tea house where we had agreed to meet earlier, but Shibao never showed up. The next morning, I returned to the tea house and called his home twice, but only his wife answered. That's when I realized I'd been deceived. I had no choice but to return home and wait for another opportunity to contact him. However, no matter how many times I tried calling him afterward, I couldn't reach him. I understand why the police suspect me. I was his creditor, and they think he might have been avoiding me due to debt pressure. The police thoroughly investigated Yang Sheng's activities on the day of the incident, and the businessman had a solid alibi. As a result, he was cleared of suspicion. However, the authorities began considering whether another creditor could have been involved in Shibao's death. Wangjang County, located in the southwestern part of Anhui Province, is known for its abundant water resources and high-quality cotton production in China. This agricultural strength had also spurred the growth of local agricultural supply businesses, with many fertilizer and seed dealers making significant profits. Shibao, originally a local farmer, noticed how others were profiting from selling fertilizers and pesticides, so he decided to enter the business himself. However, over the past 2 years, the market had slowed, and his fertilizer business had struggled. His cash flow was constantly tied up, forcing him to borrow heavily from friends. His total debt had accumulated to approximately 1.3 million yen. The police investigated Shibao's creditors, but found nothing suspicious among them. At this point, the investigation had reached a dead end, forcing the authorities to focus entirely on Shibao's own activities. They began examining his recent movements, the people he had interacted with, and his financial situation in greater detail. During the investigation, a detail caught the police's attention. Before the incident, Shibao had purchased 2 life insurance policies in quick succession, one valued at 20,000 yen and another at 50,000 yen. According to the insurance terms, his beneficiaries could receive over 1 million yen in compensation. The police found Shibao's insurance purchases suspicious, as they occurred just before his death. The previous year, when he was charged with selling counterfeit goods, the total involved was over 70,000 yen. At that time, he had to borrow money from multiple sources to cover the amount, indicating that 70,000 yen was already a substantial sum for him. Despite this financial strain, he had spent 70,000 yen on insurance policies, which seemed unusual. The police noted that the beneficiary listed on both insurance policies was Shibao's wife, meaning that in the event of his death, she would receive over 1 million yen in compensation. This raised suspicions about whether Shibao's wife could have been involved in his death, motivated by the potential payout. Officers interviewed Shibao's neighbors, who consistently described the couple as loving, rarely arguing since their marriage. Based on these statements, the likelihood of Shibao's wife murdering him seemed very low. The police questioned Shibao's wife again. She claimed she was completely unaware that Shibao had purchased the insurance policies. After further questioning, the police concluded that she had no opportunity to commit the crime and cleared her as a suspect. However, they remained puzzled. Why had Shibao purchased 2 life insurance policies and named his wife as the beneficiary? Looking at the crime scene, it seemed highly improbable that Shibao had staged his own death. Self-immolation would be an extremely painful and challenging act to commit. While the police couldn't entirely rule out the possibility, it seemed implausible. By this point, the nature of the case remained unsolved, making it increasingly complex. After compiling and analyzing the gathered evidence, the police decided to focus on tracking Shibao's movements prior to the incident. They implemented a strategy called vehicle tracing. Using the Tongma levee, the crime scene, as the center, they expanded outward and reviewed surveillance footage from nearby traffic checkpoints recorded before the incident. Their goal was to trace the movements of Shibao's Chevrolet. After thoroughly examining the footage, the criminal investigation team finally located Shibao's car. Upon zooming in on the surveillance footage, they made a critical discovery. There was another person in the car with Shibao seated in the back seat. Although the footage was blurry and the person's features were indistinct, this clue was vital. The timestamp on the surveillance footage was 10:04 p.m. 2 hours later, Shibao's car had plunged off the levee, ignited, and exploded. Was Shibao's death connected to the unidentified passenger in the back seat? What had happened during those 2 hours? Investigators reviewed additional footage from nearby traffic checkpoints, working step by step to reconstruct Shibao's final drive. His journey began in Wangjiang County. He drove west approximately 43 miles to Susong County, then continued driving another 37 miles to Taihu County. Finally, he drove an additional 37 miles back to Wangjiang County. What raised further suspicion was that surveillance cameras recorded Shibao's car, bearing license plate Anhui HSB 188, entering and exiting Taihu County multiple times. Specifically, he entered Taihu around 5 p.m. on February 17th and didn't leave until after 10 p.m., staying there for nearly 5 hours. This unusually long visit drew significant attention from the police. What was Shibao doing there for so long? Determined to uncover the truth, the police deployed a large number of officers to Taihu for an extensive search. They thoroughly inspected bathhouses, tea houses, restaurants, and other local establishments. Their efforts paid off when they discovered information linked to Shibao at a clothing store and a restaurant. The clothing store owner stated that Shibao had come alone and was not accompanied by anyone. However, the restaurant owner provided a more detailed account. According to him, on the evening of February 17th, the night of the incident, a man driving a car with the plate number Anhui HSB 188 came in for dinner. He was certain it was Shibao. This time, however, Shibao was not alone, but accompanied by a thin man. I clearly remember that a heavier man was drinking Red Bull, while the thin man was drinking alcohol. Quite a lot, in fact. The thin guy seemed drunk and even caused a disturbance with other customers. Afterward, Shibao helped the man into his car and drove away. Meanwhile, a friend of Zhu Shibao named Xiao Kong, who worked at a car wash next to Shibao's agricultural supply store, revealed receiving a strange text message recently. The message read, "What is Chief Zhu doing these days?" Confused, Xiao Kang replied, "Chief Zhu? Who is this?" The person responded, "Chief Zhu Shibao." When Xiao Kang asked who was texting him, the person replied, "I'm his lover. I'm pregnant with his child." The title Chief Zhu referred to Shibao, as he was the owner of the agricultural supply business and commonly addressed that way by locals. According to Xiao Kang, Shibao was a highly responsible husband and father. He and his wife ran the fertilizer business together and were known as a loving couple with a strong marriage. Xiao Kang had never seen Shibao involved with another woman, so this sudden claim seemed confusing. Even more puzzling was how this person had obtained his phone number. Xiao Kang then texted back to inform the mysterious number that Shibao had been in a car accident and that someone had died in the vehicle fire. The woman responded with a worried tone, "Could he really be dead? If that's the case, I will have to terminate the pregnancy." Shortly after sending this message, the woman also asked for Shibao's wife's phone number. Later, Shibao's wife received a call from a woman asking about her husband's situation in a vague and brief manner. When asked who she was, the woman avoided answering and quickly hung up. Shibao's wife was left confused and disturbed. She had no idea who this woman was or why she was calling. Why had she appeared at such a coincidental time? Why was she only asking if Shibao had died in the accident without mentioning holding him accountable for the pregnancy? What was this woman's true motive? The police also grew suspicious of the identity of the mysterious woman. After further investigation, they discovered that the phone call made to Shibao's wife originated from Nanjing. On the afternoon of February 21st, 4 days after the incident, the investigation team headed to Nanjing. They traced the call to a foot massage parlor. During the inquiry, a staff member provided a critical lead. She explained that a customer had asked her to make a call to Wangjiang County, dictating the conversation word for word, but she couldn't recall any other details. She then described the customer's physical appearance, which closely resembled Shibao. Could Shibao still be alive? The case was becoming even more complicated. To verify the identity of the deceased in the burned vehicle, the police turned to the most direct and reliable method, DNA analysis. However, the body was severely charred, making it extremely difficult to obtain usable samples. After a meticulous examination, forensic experts finally identified a viable area for DNA extraction: the victim's lower jawbone. The DNA extracted from the remains was then compared to Shibao's DNA collected from his home. The results confirmed that the deceased was not Shibao. This meant Shibao was likely still alive. The man who had asked the massage parlor worker in Nanjing to make the call to Shibao's wife was very likely Shibao himself. So, who was the victim burned inside his car? The mystery deepened. Investigators then traced the phone number that had texted Xiaokang. It was registered to a fertilizer plant located west of Liaocheng City, Shandong Province. This clue gave the police renewed hope of solving the case, as Shibao had been involved in the fertilizer business for years, making it plausible that he had traveled to Shandong. Without delay, officers headed to Liaocheng, Shandong. Upon arrival, they placed the fertilizer plant's owner under surveillance. At noon on February 22nd, the police observed the plant owner having lunch at a hotel. During his meal, he made a phone call, seemingly inviting someone to join him. About 15 minutes later, Shibao appeared at the restaurant. The police, who had already set up an ambush, quickly arrested him on the spot. The truth behind the mysterious case finally came to light. Shibao confessed that his debt of over 1 million yen was tied to high-interest loans, with penalties that were even more severe. He had borrowed money with a monthly interest rate of 10%, amounting to 10,000 yen per month in interest alone. If he missed a payment, the penalty was also 10,000 yen per day. For instance, if his payment was due after 30 or 31 days, missing it by just 1 day would result in an additional 10,000 yen penalty per day. On February 17th, 2012, to avoid pressure from his creditor Yongsheng, Shibao drove aimlessly around the area. When he reached Taihu County, he encountered a man who led him to a reckless plan. That evening, Shibao took this man to a bathhouse. According to the bathhouse staff, the man Shibao brought in seemed strange. He had a foul odor, wore tattered clothes, and the lower part of his pants was torn with multiple holes. His shirt and sweater were also ripped, and he appeared covered in grease stains. Surveillance footage from that night showed the heavier man as Shibao, while the thinner man, who had a similar height but a slimmer build, was the unidentified individual accompanying him. The staff member at the bathhouse revealed that in the changing room, Shibao handed her the clothes the thin man had just taken off and instructed her to dispose of them. Then, Shibao gave the man his own outfit to wear. After discarding the clothes, Shibao led the man to the bath. Once they finished bathing, both received massages together. The thin man had short hair, a long face, and appeared nervous, frequently glancing around and clasping his hands together as he walked upstairs. So, who was this man? Shibao later confessed that the man was actually a homeless person, the same individual seen sitting in the back seat of his car that night. Encountering this homeless man gave Shibao the idea for his twisted plan. He intended to make the homeless man look identical to himself, staging a perfect setup for his disappearance. Shibao planned to have the man impersonate him, murder him, and create a fake accident scene where it would appear that Shibao had died, allowing him to erase his massive debts. After the bath, Shibao purchased a new set of clothes for himself and gave his old outfit to the homeless man to wear, hoping to mislead authorities. Around 9 p.m., Shibao took the man to a small restaurant in Taihu County, where he encouraged the man to consume half a liter of strong liquor with 50% alcohol content. On the drive back to Wangjiang County, Shibao made a stop at an old warehouse in Liangquan Town. Right outside the warehouse, he strangled the homeless man to death. Afterward, Shibao drove past Wangjiang and toward the Tongma levee. Near a spot approximately 47 miles from the levee, he slowly drove the vehicle down the embankment, intentionally crashing it into a small tree. Exiting the car, he placed the homeless man's body in the driver's seat, poured gasoline he had prepared earlier all over the vehicle, and set it on fire before fleeing the scene. However, Shibao was still anxious and unsure whether his staged accident had worked. To verify, he impersonated his own lover, messaging Xiaokang from Nanjing and asking a foot massage parlor staff member to call his wife to confirm the incident. Afterward, he traveled from Nanjing to Liaocheng, Shandong. Shibao later confessed all these details to the police. It turned out the victim in the car was indeed the homeless man. To obtain definitive proof of the victim's identity, the police searched for the discarded clothes from the bathhouse where Shibao and the homeless man had bathed. After a thorough search, they finally located the clothes worn by the homeless man before changing. DNA extracted from those clothes perfectly matched the DNA of the body found in the burned vehicle. In an effort to identify the homeless man, the police carried a photo of him taken with Shibao at the bathhouse and questioned locals. An elderly woman immediately recognized the man, stating that a few days earlier, when she was warming herself by a stove, the thin man had joined her there. She clearly remembered his appearance due to their close proximity and confirmed to the police that he was the man they were looking for. Ultimately, the truth behind the mysterious case was fully exposed. To escape his debts, Shibao had brutally murdered a homeless man and staged a fake car accident. His meticulously planned crime was uncovered by the police. However, investigators suspected that Shibao's motive wasn't solely to evade his debts. The 2 insurance policies he had purchased before the crime suggested a possible insurance fraud scheme as well. If Shibao were declared dead, the 2 life insurance policies would become active, entitling his family to receive over 1 million yen in compensation. Though the police couldn't conclusively prove the insurance fraud, they believed Shibao's plan was driven both by debt avoidance and an attempt at insurance fraud. Despite his careful planning, every part of Shibao's elaborate scheme ultimately failed. What could have driven Zhu Shibao to such a horrifying decision, leading him down the path of crime? Shibao explained that 3 years earlier, he had started a fertilizer business. However, in the past 2 years, the market had slowed significantly. His capital was tied up, and he struggled to secure bank loans. Out of desperation, he began borrowing from loan sharks through friends last year. This marked the beginning of a spiraling debt trap. He stated, "I was required to repay the loan within a month. When I missed the deadline by a few days, I was fined tens of thousands of yuan in late fees. I hadn't even paid the principal, just the interest alone. Initially, I borrowed 90,000 yen and was supposed to repay 100,000 yen after a month. However, Shibao failed to make the payment on time. As a result, late penalties of 10,000 yen per day began accumulating. Not long after, his debt had ballooned to over 1 million yen. Watching the interest continue to skyrocket, Shibao feared the debt would soon reach 2 million yen. For him, the high-interest loans felt like a bottomless black hole with no hope of repayment. This was the ruthless way loan sharks profited, pushing people into impossible debt traps. The creditors demanded payment daily, and Shibao realized he was trapped with no means to repay. He felt helpless, knowing that failure to pay could result in severe physical harm or even death. To Shibao, death seemed like the only way to escape the crushing debt. However, he didn't want to die himself. He wanted to find someone else to take his place. This twisted thinking ultimately led to the murder near the Changjiang levee. On October 18, 2012, the Anqing Intermediate People's Court sentenced Shibao to death with a 2-year suspension of execution and permanently revoked his political rights for the crime of murder. Regarding the loan sharking activities tied to Shibao's case, the police continued investigating the creditors and gathering further evidence. At the same time, they were working to locate the homeless man's family. The Shibao case concluded, leaving behind a trail of sorrow and unforgettable lessons from this tragic story. Let's take a moment to reflect and remind ourselves of the important messages this case conveys. First and foremost, the greatest lesson is financial responsibility. Borrowing money without carefully considering repayment capacity can quickly turn into a double-edged sword, pushing people into overwhelming debt and even despair, just like Zhu Shibao. It's crucial to stay away from the tempting offers of predatory lending, as behind them often lie deadly interest rates and severe consequences. If you face financial difficulties, never hesitate to seek help. Finally, and most importantly, respect the law and value life. Today's video ends here. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.